The repair bay at Outpost Sigma 7 looked like a mechanical graveyard where technology went to either be resurrected or receive a dignified burial. Field Engineer Thomas Morrison, Tank, to everyone who'd ever watched him squeeze his considerable frame into impossibly tight maintenance spaces, surveyed the latest batch of damaged equipment with the weary satisfaction of someone who'd made a career out of making broken things work again. "Another productive day in paradise," he muttered, scrolling through work orders on his portable display. Plasma rifle with a melted firing chamber, hover bike that apparently thinks gravity is optional, and... He paused, studying the final entry. Valen combat armor with comprehensive systems failure. That should be interesting. The woman who'd brought in the armor stood near the intake station, her arms crossed as she watched Tank's preliminary assessment. She looked almost entirely human, except for the elegantly pointed ears that marked her as Valen, and she carried herself with the kind of controlled alertness that suggested either military training or extensive personal combat experience. "Are you Thomas Morrison?" she asked, her accent adding musical notes to standard Galactic. "They said you're the only engineer on this outpost who can work with Valen technology." "That's me, though can work with might be optimistic depending on how badly damaged this armor actually is." Tank activated his diagnostic scanner, running it over the sleek black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "I'm Tank, by the way, and you are?" "Vera, freelance security contractor. That armor's kept me alive through more firefights than I care to count, so I'm hoping it's fixable rather than recyclable." Tank studied the readouts from his scanner, noting power fluctuations and system errors that painted a picture of equipment that had seen serious combat recently. "Well, the good news is that Valen engineering is overbuilt to the point of paranoia. The bad news is that whoever designed this armor apparently thought user-friendly maintenance was for weaklings. Can you repair it? Probably. Though I should warn you that working on Valen gear always makes me question my life choices. Your people's idea of simple technology involves quantum matrices and neural interfaces that most human engineers need advanced degrees just to look at without getting confused." Vera smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen since she'd arrived. Valen engineering philosophy holds that if technology can be easily understood, it's not sufficiently advanced. Ah, the old complexity for complexity's sake approach. Very inspiring. Tank began transferring the armor to his primary workstation, noting its substantial weight and the way certain components seemed to pulse with their own internal energy. "Fair warning, this is going to take a while. Valen armor isn't the kind of thing you can fix with a hammer and some creative swearing." "How long?" "Depends on what I find when I start digging into the systems. Could be a few hours, could be a few days. The quantum power matrix alone looks like it was designed by someone who thought linear causality was a suggestion rather than a physical law." As Tank began the delicate process of accessing the armor's internal systems, he found himself impressed despite his general skepticism about overly complicated technology. The armor's construction represented a level of material science and engineering integration that made human military equipment look primitive by comparison. "So," he said, carefully removing access panels that revealed circuitry patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them, "what kind of security work do you do? Private escort, corporate protection, really aggressive pest control, conflict zone reconnaissance mostly, checking on conditions in disputed territories, assessing threats to civilian populations, that sort of thing." Vera settled into a nearby chair, watching Tank work with obvious interest. "It's dangerous work, but someone needs to gather accurate information about what's actually happening out there, as opposed to the official reports that make everything sound either completely under control or about to explode into full-scale war with no middle ground." "Exactly. The truth tends to be more complicated than either side wants to admit." Tank nodded, using specialized tools to interface with the armor's diagnostic systems. I've seen enough damaged equipment come through here to know that whatever's happening in the disputed zones, it's not going according to anyone's official plans. This armor's taken hits from weapons that don't match the threat assessments I've seen. What do you mean? Well, according to intelligence briefings, both sides are supposed to be using standard military-grade weapons in their border skirmishes. But this damage pattern suggests exposure to experimental energy weapons, quantum disruptors, and at least one impact from something that operates on principles I don't recognize. Vera's expression grew thoughtful. You can determine all that from battle damage. Physics doesn't lie, even when people do. Different weapons leave different signatures in materials and electronics. Your armor's been through encounters with technology that officially doesn't exist on either side of this conflict. As Tank continued his examination, he discovered that the armor systems were more sophisticated than anything he'd worked on before. The neural interface alone represented advances in human-machine interaction that were theoretical concepts in human research, but apparently standard features in Valen equipment. "This is incredible," he said, studying the quantum matrix that powered the armor's various systems. "The processing power built into this thing could probably run a small starship. What kind of security contractor needs equipment this advanced?" "The kind who works in situations where standard gear gets you killed," Vera replied, though something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. Tank spent the next several hours deep in the armor systems, carefully diagnosing and repairing the cascade failures that had rendered it inoperable. The work required a combination of human engineering principles and Valen technological concepts that pushed his understanding to its limits. "You know," he said during a break to recalibrate his tools, "I've worked on a lot of alien technology over the years, but this armor is something special. The integration between biological monitoring and mechanical systems is seamless. It's like wearing a second nervous system. Is that a problem for the repairs? Actually, it makes the job easier once you understand the logic. Everything's connected to everything else, so fixing one system tends to improve the others. It's elegant, in a terrifyingly complex sort of way." As Tank worked, he found himself enjoying the conversation with Vera. She asked intelligent questions about the technical aspects of the repairs and demonstrated a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of both engineering principles and military tactics. Her observations about the conflict zones painted a picture of a situation far more complicated than the official reports suggested. "There," Tank said finally, as the armor systems came back online with a harmonic hum that seemed to resonate through the repair bay. "All systems nominal, power matrix stabilized, and neural interface calibrated. Though I should probably mention that during the repair process, I had to update some of the quantum encryption protocols. Your armor should now interface more efficiently with compatible systems." Compatible systems. Valen command networks, communication arrays, that sort of thing. Standard military equipment tends to work better when all the components can talk to each other properly. Tank began packing his tools, satisfied with another successful repair. "Though I have to ask, where did you get armor this advanced? This isn't standard military issue, even for special forces." Vera stood and approached the restored armor, running her hand along its surface with obvious relief. "It was a gift from someone who wanted to make sure I came back alive from dangerous assignments. Well, whoever gave it to you has excellent taste in protective equipment. This thing should keep you safe through just about anything short of a direct hit from orbital bombardment." As Vera prepared to leave with her repaired armor, Tank found himself oddly reluctant to see her go. It had been refreshing to work on technology that challenged his skills while talking with someone who understood both the theoretical and practical aspects of military engineering. "If you ever need maintenance work again, you know where to find me," he said, handing her the diagnostic report that documented the repairs. Though hopefully next time the damage won't be quite so extensive. Thank you, Tank. Your work may have saved my life. Just doing my job. Though I have to say, fixing Valen technology beats replacing burned-out plasma rifle components any day. Much more interesting engineering challenges. After Vera left, Tank returned to his routine maintenance tasks, unaware that his skilled repair work had triggered protocols built into the armor's quantum matrix, protocols that had been dormant since its creation, waiting for the specific combination of technical expertise and biometric compatibility that would activate ancient bonding mechanisms designed to protect the Valen royal bloodline. He had no way of knowing that Vera was actually Princess Verathani, or that his careful restoration of her armor had automatically enrolled him in systems that would soon make him one of the most strategically important humans in the conflict zone. Sometimes the most momentous events begin with the simple satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. Tank was elbow-deep in the guts of a malfunctioning atmospheric processor when the alarms started going off, indicating incoming diplomatic traffic that required immediate security protocols. Through the repair bay's reinforced windows, he could see Valen vessels settling onto the outpost's landing platforms with the kind of precision that suggested either very skilled pilots or very advanced navigation systems. Morrison. Colonel Hayes's voice crackled through the intercom with the tone of someone whose day had just become significantly more complicated. Report to the diplomatic receiving area immediately. And try to look presentable. We've got royalty incoming. Royalty. Tank looked down at his work clothes, which bore the accumulated evidence of 3 days spent wrestling with alien technology and human stubbornness. Colonel, I'm a grease monkey engineer. I don't think I'm qualified for royal meet-and-greet duties. You're about to find out. Move it, Morrison. Tank hastily cleaned his hands and grabbed a semi-clean uniform from his locker, wondering what kind of diplomatic crisis could possibly require the expertise of a field engineer. The diplomatic receiving area was a formal space that saw little use at a maintenance outpost, but it had been hastily activated with all the ceremony the facility could manage on short notice. The Valen delegation that entered the receiving area was impressive in both size and obvious importance. Royal guards in ceremonial armor flanked a group of individuals whose elaborate robes indicated high political rank. But at the center of the delegation, wearing formal garments that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible patterns, was someone Tank recognized immediately. Vera, he said, confusion evident in his voice. Actually, she replied with a smile that mixed apology with something deeper. Princess Verathani, daughter of Queen Melthara and heir to the Valen Confederation. I apologize for the deception, Tank, but my reconnaissance work required discretion. Tank felt his brain attempting to process this information and coming up mostly empty. Princess, you're a princess, and I just spent 2 days fixing your armor while complaining about Valen engineering philosophy. You did indeed, and your excellent work has created a situation that requires immediate attention. Princess Vera gestured to one of her advisors, a stern-looking Valen whose ceremonial robes suggested either high political rank or really expensive taste in formal wear. This is Chancellor Velkorin, my mother's chief diplomatic advisor. Engineer Morrison, Chancellor Velkorin said formally, your repair of Princess Verathani's armor has triggered the ancient Kethmaran bond, a consort witness connection that activates when someone successfully restores royal armor to full functionality. The what bond now? Consort witness, Princess Vera explained, her expression mixing embarrassment with determination. It's an old law designed to protect the royal bloodline by ensuring that those who demonstrate skill, loyalty, and trustworthiness in critical moments become permanently connected to our security network. Tank looked around the diplomatic receiving area, noting the expressions of the assembled humans and Valens that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed panic. Connected how, exactly? Chancellor Velkorin activated a portable holographic display that showed Tank's biometric readings overlaid with what appeared to be quantum encryption patterns. During your repair work, the armor systems recorded and analyzed your genetic signature, brain patterns, and technical expertise. These readings are now permanently encoded in the Royal Armor's quantum matrix. Which means, Princess Vera continued, that you now have automatic access to Valen command protocols, encrypted communication networks, and classified intelligence databases that your biometric signature can unlock. Tank stared at the holographic display, watching his own biological readings interface with alien technology in ways that made his head hurt. Let me make sure I understand this. By fixing your armor, I accidentally became some sort of honorary Valen military officer. More than that, Chancellor Velkorin replied grimly. The Kethmaran bond grants you theoretical authority equivalent to a royal consort in matters of planetary security and diplomatic relations. Your biometric codes now carry the same access privileges as a member of the royal family. But I'm a human engineer who specializes in making broken things work again. I don't know anything about royal protocols or diplomatic relations. Nevertheless, Princess Vera said gently, the bond exists, and Tank, there's something else you need to know. My reconnaissance missions in the disputed territories have uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that threatens both our peoples. Colonel Hayes, who had been standing at rigid attention throughout the proceedings, finally spoke up. What kind of conspiracy, Your Highness? A coordinated effort between human defense contractors and Valen military suppliers to prolong the current conflict indefinitely. They've been manipulating intelligence reports, manufacturing border incidents, and ensuring that every peace initiative fails at crucial moments. Princess Vera's expression grew grim. The evidence is conclusive, but it's stored in encrypted files that require both human and Valen security clearances to access. Tank felt pieces clicking together in his mind. And the Kethmaran bond gives me Valen clearance while I already have human access codes. Exactly. Together, we could expose the entire network and provide evidence needed to prosecute the war profiteers who have been manipulating both our governments. Chancellor Velkorin cleared his throat diplomatically. However, Engineer Morrison, you should understand that formalizing the Kethmaran bond carries significant risks. The conspiracy we're discussing involves powerful entities from both civilizations who would not hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their operations. Formalizing. Tank looked between Princess Vera and her advisor. I thought you said the bond was already activated. The automatic bonding creates potential connection, Princess Vera explained. But to access the highest-level classified files, we would need to undergo the formal ceremony that creates permanent neural linking between our consciousness patterns. Neural linking. Tank rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building that had nothing to do with atmospheric pressure. You're talking about connecting our minds. In matters relating to the bond's purpose, yes. You would have access to my knowledge of Valen intelligence networks, and I would have access to your understanding of human military systems. Princess Vera stepped closer, her expression intense but not unkind. It would be the ultimate gesture of trust between our peoples. Shared minds, shared knowledge, shared responsibility for ending a conflict that has cost thousands of lives on both sides. Tank looked around the diplomatic receiving area at faces that represented the complexity of interstellar relations. Human military personnel calculating strategic implications, Valen advisors weighing political ramifications, and Princess Vera watching him with an expression that mixed hope with desperate necessity. Your Highness, he said carefully, I need to ask you something directly. When you brought your armor to me for repair, did you know this would happen? I knew the possibility existed, she replied honestly. The Kethmaran protocols are built into all royal armor as a safeguard. But Tank, I chose you not because of any strategic calculation, but because your reputation for integrity and skill suggested you were someone who could be trusted with the responsibility. Even though I'm just a maintenance engineer, especially because you're a maintenance engineer, you fix things that are broken without concern for politics or profit. The conspiracy we're facing exists because too many people in power care more about strategic advantage than about the lives being lost to maintain that advantage. Colonel Hayes activated his communication array, speaking quietly with what Tank assumed were his superiors at military command. When he finished, his expression suggested the conversation hadn't gone well. "Engineer Morrison," the colonel said formally, "I've been instructed to inform you that if you choose to formalize this bond, you'll be operating under joint human-Valen authority with diplomatic immunity and access to resources from both civilizations. However, you'll also become a target for elimination by forces that profit from the current state of managed conflict. And if I don't, then the evidence of the conspiracy remains inaccessible, the war profiteering continues, and thousands more people die in conflicts designed to maximize corporate profits rather than achieve any legitimate political goals." Tank walked to the receiving area's viewport, looking out at the repair bays where he'd spent the last several years fixing equipment damaged in a conflict he'd assumed was based on genuine political differences. Now he was learning that much of the damage, much of the suffering, had been artificially created by entities that saw war as a business opportunity rather than a human tragedy. "Princess Vera," he said without turning around, "if we do this, if we formalize this bond and expose the conspiracy, what happens then? Then we give both our peoples the chance to choose peace based on truth rather than conflict based on manipulation." Her voice carried the weight of royal authority mixed with personal conviction. "But Tank, I need you to understand, once we create the neural link, there's no going back. Our minds will be connected in ways that go beyond simple information sharing. Connected how? We'll be able to sense each other's emotions, share memories, and communicate without words when necessary. It's intimate, in ways that most people find either comforting or terrifying." Tank turned back to face the assembled diplomatic delegation, seeing hope and fear warring in their expressions. "Princess, I have one more question. In your professional opinion, what are the odds that we can actually pull this off without getting ourselves killed in the process?" "Honestly, about 50-50. The forces we're up against have vast resources and no scruples about eliminating threats to their operations. Those aren't great odds." "No," Princess Vera replied with a smile that somehow made the impossible situation seem almost manageable, "but they're better than the odds of achieving lasting peace if we do nothing." Tank looked around the diplomatic receiving area one more time, noting the faces of people whose lives would be affected by his decision. Then he looked at Princess Vera, the woman who'd trusted him with royal armor, who'd revealed a conspiracy that threatened both their peoples, and who was now asking him to risk everything for the chance to build something better than endless, profitable warfare. "Well," he said finally, "I've always been better at fixing things than leaving them broken. I guess it's time to find out whether that applies to interstellar politics." Princess Vera's relief was evident in her expression. "Then we should begin preparations for the formal bonding ceremony. And Tank, thank you for choosing to trust me with this responsibility. Thank you for trusting me with royal armor. Though next time someone brings me equipment that could accidentally make me a diplomatic target, maybe include a warning label." As the diplomatic delegation began making arrangements for the most important repair work of Tank's career, he reflected that his job had always been about making broken things function properly. He was just starting to realize that sometimes the most broken things were the systems that kept people divided when they could be working together. The secure briefing room aboard the Valen diplomatic vessel felt like the inside of a crystalline geode, with walls that seemed to pulse with their own internal light, while displaying holographic readouts that made Tank's head spin with their complexity. Princess Vera sat across from him, formal robes replaced by practical clothing that suggested they were now operating under emergency protocols rather than diplomatic courtesy. "Before we proceed with the formal bonding ceremony," she said, activating security fields that hummed with quantum interference, "you need to understand exactly what we're facing." The holographic displays shifted to show intelligence files that painted a picture Tank really didn't want to see. Corporate logos from human space floated alongside Valen military insignia, connected by financial transfer records and communication logs that documented years of coordinated manipulation. "The Meridian Defense Consortium," Princess Vera said, highlighting a cluster of human corporate entities, "has been working with the Valen War Guild to ensure that every peace initiative fails just before reaching successful conclusion. They've been coordinating weapons sales to both sides, manufacturing border incidents, and manipulating intelligence reports to maintain profitable instability." Tank studied the data streams, recognizing patterns that made his engineers' instincts scream warnings. This isn't just war profiteering. This is systems engineering applied to conflict management. They've been treating the entire war as a machine that needs regular maintenance to keep operating efficiently. Exactly. And the maintenance has been very expensive in terms of lives lost and resources wasted. Princess Vera pulled up another set of files. "General Thakmer on our side has been feeding them intelligence about our peace negotiation strategies in exchange for advanced weapons technology that he then uses to justify larger military budgets." "While on the human side," Tank said, recognizing some of the corporate signatures, "I'll bet we find defense contractors who have been providing similar intelligence to ensure that Valen negotiators always have just enough advance warning to prepare counter-strategies that guarantee failure." "You're learning to think like a conspiracy analyst rather than an engineer." "Same skill set, really. When you're troubleshooting complex systems, you have to assume that what looks like random failure might actually be deliberate sabotage." Tank highlighted several connection points in the data web. The patterns, too, consistent for coincidence. Someone's been very carefully engineering these conflicts to maximize duration and minimize resolution. Princess Vera's expression grew grim as she activated another series of displays. "The neural bonding ceremony will grant us combined access to the highest-level classified files from both civilizations. But Tank, once we access those files, we'll have perhaps hours before the conspiracy realizes we've uncovered their operations. What happens then? Then they attempt to eliminate us before we can release the evidence. And given the resources they control, that attempt will likely involve significant firepower and absolutely no regard for collateral damage." Tank leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "So our timeline is: undergo neural bonding, access classified files, compile." The complicated version involves navigating Valen bonding protocols that your human nervous system wasn't designed for, interfacing with quantum-encrypted databases that might react unpredictably to mixed-species access, and coordinating the simultaneous release of evidence to oversight bodies in both civilizations, while under active attack by forces that include military-grade assets from our own governments. Tank rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility settling around him like gravity from a much larger planet. "Princess, I have to ask, how certain are you that this conspiracy is real, and not just the kind of coincidental patterns that paranoid minds tend to find in complex data?" "Watch this," she said, activating a communication log that showed real-time coordination between supposedly opposing forces. 3 days ago, human forces conducted a surprise raid on Valen Supply Depot 7. The raid was repelled with exactly the right amount of casualties to justify increased military spending on both sides, and the timing coincided perfectly with budget hearings in both our governments. The casualties were planned, down to the individual level. The forces involved were specifically chosen to ensure maximum emotional impact with minimal strategic value. Families lost loved ones so that defense contractors could argue for larger budgets to prevent future tragedies. Tank stared at the data, feeling sick as he realized the implications. They're not just profiting from war, they're farming human suffering for quarterly earnings reports. And they've been doing it for years, while our governments think they're making independent decisions based on legitimate intelligence. Princess Vera's voice carried harmonics of barely controlled rage. The bonding ceremony will give us access to files that document every manufactured incident, every manipulated report, and every coordinated strategy session where they plan the next phase of their operation. But what about the risks of the neural bonding itself? You mentioned that human nervous systems weren't designed for VLN protocols. The quantum interface should compensate for species differences, but there's no precedent for human VLN neural bonding at this level. We're essentially conducting an unrehearsed experiment with our consciousness patterns, while under time pressure to expose a conspiracy before it can eliminate us. Tank walked to the briefing room's viewport, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed less like navigation points and more like witnesses to the systematic manipulation of entire civilizations. Princess Vera, I need you to be completely honest with me. What are the odds that we survive this process with our sanity intact? Unknown. The neural bonding might enhance our capabilities beyond normal parameters, or it might create psychological instabilities that make us unreliable witnesses to our own discoveries. But those aren't comforting odds. No, but they're better than the odds of stopping this conspiracy through conventional channels. The entities we're facing have corrupted oversight systems in both governments and have resources to eliminate threats through legal or illegal means. But Tank turned back to face her, noting the determination in her violet eyes that reminded him of high-quality alloy steel, beautiful, but absolutely unbreakable when properly tempered. Princess, there's something I need to tell you before we proceed. I've never been in any kind of romantic relationship, let alone one that involves sharing consciousness with alien royalty. If this bonding creates emotional connections I'm not prepared for. Tank, she said gently, the Kethmaran bond isn't about romance, it's about partnership in the deepest sense. We'll share knowledge, emotions, and purpose, but we'll still be individuals making our own choices. Think of it as extremely intimate friendship with strategic benefits. Extremely intimate friendship with strategic benefits. That's either the most comforting description of alien neural bonding I've ever heard, or the most terrifying, depending on perspective. Both, probably. But Tank, I need you to understand. I chose you for this bond not just because of your technical skills, but because your psychological profile suggests someone who won't be overwhelmed by shared consciousness. You've spent your career dealing with complex systems that require patience, attention to detail, and the ability to see problems from multiple angles simultaneously. You mean I'm too stubborn to let alien technology drive me crazy? Essentially, yes. Your mind is already accustomed to interfacing with systems that operate on principles different from human logic. The neural bonding should feel like learning to use a new tool rather than losing your identity. Tank studied the intelligence displays one more time, seeing the web of corruption that had turned legitimate political differences into profitable entertainment for entities that viewed war as a business opportunity. Princess Vera, if we do this and we succeed, what happens to us afterward? We become the most protected witnesses in galactic history, assuming we survive long enough to testify. If we fail, we become the most wanted targets in two-star systems. Yes, but Tank, if we don't try, this conspiracy continues indefinitely. More manufactured conflicts, more manipulated intelligence, more families losing loved ones so that corporate boards can report improved quarterly earnings. Tank looked at Princess Vera, the woman who'd trusted him with royal armor, who'd revealed a conspiracy that could reshape the relationship between their civilizations, and who was now asking him to literally share his mind with her to prevent thousands of unnecessary deaths. "Princess," he said finally, "I've spent my entire career fixing things that other people broke through carelessness or incompetence. I guess it's time to find out whether that skill set applies to fixing civilizations that other people broke through deliberate malice. Then we should begin preparations for the bonding ceremony. And Tank, whatever happens during the neural linking process, remember that we're doing this to give both our peoples the chance to choose their own futures, instead of having them manipulated by entities that see them only as profit centers." As they prepared for the most important repair work of Tank's career, he reflected that his job had always been about understanding how complex systems were supposed to function and fixing them when they didn't. He was just starting to realize that the most complex system he'd ever encountered was the relationship between civilizations that had been carefully broken to serve someone else's interests. The formal Kethmaran bonding ceremony took place in Outpost Sigma 7's most heavily shielded facility, the main engineering bay, where Tank had spent countless hours fixing broken equipment. The irony wasn't lost on him that his most important repair job would involve mending the relationship between two civilizations, while literally connecting his consciousness to alien royalty. "Are you ready for this?" Princess Vera asked, her hands resting on the quantum interface array they'd constructed using components from her royal armor and Tank's most sophisticated diagnostic equipment. "I'm about as ready as someone can be for having their brain rewired by alien technology while exposing a galactic conspiracy," Tank replied, trying to inject humor into a situation that felt like standing on the edge of a dimensional rift. "Though I should probably mention that my experience with consciousness sharing involves mostly arguing with malfunctioning AI systems. The neural bonding won't erase your individual personality," Chancellor Velkorin assured them, monitoring the quantum field generators that would facilitate the connection. "It creates a bridge between minds while maintaining personal autonomy and distinct identity patterns. Think of it as installing additional processing capacity, rather than replacing your existing systems. Think of it as installing additional processing capacity, rather than replacing your existing systems," Princess Vera added with a smile that made the impossible situation seem almost manageable. "Though I should warn you that Valen thought patterns operate on quantum principles that might feel unusual at first." "Unusual how? Are we talking mildly disorienting, unusual, or existential crisis unusual?" "More like suddenly understanding 17-dimensional mathematics while simultaneously experiencing synesthetic poetry unusual. But you'll adapt quickly." Tank looked at the improvised bonding apparatus they'd assembled, a hybrid of Valen royal technology and human engineering that probably violated several safety protocols from both civilizations. "You know, when I took this job, the most dangerous thing I expected to encounter was accidentally electrocuting myself while fixing plasma conduits. And now you're about to voluntarily electrocute yourself while connecting your consciousness to alien royalty in order to expose an interstellar conspiracy," Princess Vera observed. "It's been quite a career progression." The quantum interface hummed to life as Tank placed his hands on the human-compatible neural contacts, while Princess Vera interfaced with the Valen consciousness matrix built into her armor. The connection began gradually, a tingling sensation that built into full synaptic integration as their neural patterns synchronized. "I, Thomas Morrison," Tank said as the ancient protocols required, "accept the bond of Kethmaran with Princess Verathani, knowing that this choice will intertwine our minds across all challenges to come." "And I, Princess Verathani," she replied, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated directly in Tank's enhanced consciousness. Confirmed the bond of Kethmarin with Thomas Morrison, accepting him as partner in knowledge, purpose, and the defense of truth against those who would corrupt it for profit. The neural linking activated with a sensation that Tank's brain could only interpret as controlled lightning, mixed with the feeling of suddenly remembering everything he'd ever forgotten. Princess Vera's consciousness touched his own, not invasive, but like discovering a part of himself that had been missing without his knowledge. Knowledge flowed between them. Her memories of growing up with the burden of royal responsibility, his experiences maintaining the equipment that kept frontier outposts functional. Her understanding of interstellar politics merged with his practical knowledge of how complex systems actually worked, creating a shared perspective that neither could have achieved alone. But more than information, Tank could feel her emotions. The loneliness of carrying secrets that could affect entire civilizations, the determination to break cycles of artificial conflict, and underneath it all, genuine respect for the human engineer who'd fixed her armor without knowing he was handling royal equipment. The bonding process triggered automatic access protocols throughout both civilizations' intelligence networks. Classified files unlocked themselves as their combined biometric signatures activated security clearances that had been designed to require exactly this kind of dual-species authorization. Tank, Princess Vera's mental voice carried frequencies that bypassed his auditory system entirely. Can you access what I'm accessing? Through their shared neural link, he could see the intelligence files that documented years of systematic manipulation. Communication logs between defense contractors and military suppliers. Financial records showing coordinated weapons sales designed to maximize conflict duration. Operational plans for manufacturing incidents that would derail peace negotiations at crucial moments. The Nexus protocols, Tank said, recognizing the overall strategy that connected dozens of seemingly separate operations. They've been treating interstellar politics like a complex machine that needs regular maintenance to keep producing the desired output. Profitable conflict with controlled escalation parameters, Princess Vera added through their link. They've been engineering wars the same way we engineer starships, with careful attention to efficiency, resource management, and long-term operational sustainability. The evidence was overwhelming. Decades of coordinated manipulation that had kept both civilizations locked in cycles of managed hostility, while corporate entities profited from arms sales, reconstruction contracts, and intelligence brokerage. The conspiracy reached into the highest levels of both governments, involving officials who had unknowingly based policy decisions on deliberately falsified information. But their investigation triggered automatic alerts throughout the intelligence networks. Warning, came the voice of Outpost Sigma-7's AI. Unauthorized access to classified databases detected. Security protocols activated. Through the base's communication systems, they could hear alarms beginning to sound as the conspiracy realized that their most protected secrets had been exposed. In the engineering bay, Colonel Hayes began receiving urgent communications as evidence cascaded through official channels faster than any suppression effort could contain it. They know we found them, Princess Vera said through their neural link. Then we need to make sure this evidence reaches people who can act on it before they can eliminate us, Tank replied, their shared consciousness allowing instantaneous communication and decision-making. Using their combined authority, Tank's human security clearances and Princess Vera's royal command codes, they transmitted the complete conspiracy files to every major oversight body, news organization, and military command structure in both civilizations simultaneously. The information spread through quantum communication networks at faster-than-light speeds, making suppression impossible. The response was immediate and explosive. On both sides, military commanders began arresting the conspirators identified in the intelligence files. Corporate entities, found their assets frozen as investigators moved to unravel networks that had operated with impunity for decades. Politicians who had based careers on manipulated intelligence faced immediate calls for resignation and criminal investigation. External attack imminent, announced the base AI as proximity alarms indicated incoming hostile craft, all personnel to defensive positions. Through their shared consciousness, Tank and Princess Vera could coordinate responses with unprecedented precision. Their neural link allowed them to anticipate attack patterns, coordinate defensive systems, and communicate tactical information faster than conventional methods would allow. The assault came from multiple directions: corporate security forces attempting to eliminate the witnesses, while Valen separatists tried to prevent contamination of royal bloodlines through alien bonding. But the attackers had underestimated what two minds working in perfect coordination could accomplish. Tank's engineering expertise combined with Princess Vera's tactical training allowed them to turn the outpost's maintenance systems into defensive weapons. Plasma conduits became energy projectors, atmospheric processors became chemical deterrents, and the quantum communication array became a jamming system that disabled attacking craft's navigation computers. "You know," Tank said aloud as they coordinated countermeasures against the assault, "when I imagined my first shared consciousness experience, I didn't picture it involving quite this much combat engineering." "The bonding ceremony traditionally involves less gunfire," Princess Vera agreed, using her royal command codes to activate Valen defensive systems that had been hidden in the outpost structure. "Though I have to admit, your approach to improvised weapons systems is quite creative." The battle raged for several hours, but the conspiracy's forces were ultimately overwhelmed by the evidence Tank and Princess Vera had released. As news of the corruption spread, loyalist forces from both civilizations arrived to protect the witnesses whose testimony would be crucial for prosecuting the war profiteers. 6 months later, engineer consort Thomas Morrison stood in his new workshop aboard the Valen diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, reviewing refugee resettlement reports, while his wife worked on trade agreements that would have been impossible under the old system of artificial conflict. The neural bond had evolved beyond its original purpose, becoming less about shared intelligence and more about shared perspective. They could still access each other's knowledge when necessary, but more importantly, they could approach complex problems from both human and Valen viewpoints simultaneously. "Any regrets about leaving the simple life of equipment maintenance?" Princess Vera asked, joining him at the workshop's observation window, where stars wheeled in patterns that their shared consciousness could appreciate in ways neither species could achieve alone. "Well," Tank said thoughtfully, "I do miss the days when the most complicated repair job involved fixing plasma rifles that had been used as improvised hammers. There's something appealingly straightforward about problems that can be solved with the right tools and sufficient applied stubbornness. As opposed to negotiating interstellar trade agreements while neurally bonded to alien royalty, whose people's idea of simple technology involves quantum matrices that make my diagnostic equipment look like stone tools. The quantum matrices aren't that complicated once you understand the underlying principles. Princess, I love you dearly, but your people's definition of simple would give most human engineers nervous breakdowns. Last week I watched one of your technicians casually reprogram a starship's navigation computer using what looked like interpretive dance. That was artistic expression combined with quantum field manipulation. Very efficient once you develop the proper rhythm." Tank pulled her closer, marveling at how natural it felt to share consciousness with someone whose people he'd been trained to see as technologically incomprehensible. "You know, when I joined the engineering corps, I thought the most exotic relationship I'd ever have would be dating someone from a different colony world. And instead, you're neurally bonded to alien royalty, while serving as joint coordinator for the largest corruption investigation in galactic history. It's been quite an adjustment, though I have to say, the neural linking has some unexpected benefits. For instance, I never have to wonder whether you actually understand my technical explanations or you're just being polite. Your technical explanations are genuinely fascinating, Princess Vera confirmed through their mental connection. Though your tendency to anthropomorphize malfunctioning equipment remains endearing rather than scientifically accurate. That plasma conduit was definitely having attitude problems. Don't let shared consciousness convince you otherwise. As they stood together watching ships travel through quantum corridors that made conventional space travel seem primitive, Tank reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd started as an engineer trained to fix broken machines, but the neural bond with Princess Vera had taught him to fix broken systems, including the relationships between civilizations that had been carefully corrupted to serve other people's interests. The conspiracy they'd exposed had been completely dismantled, its architects facing justice, while the artificial conflicts they'd maintained gave way to genuine cooperation. Trade routes now carried goods and cultural exchange instead of weapons and propaganda, while joint oversight committees ensured that future disagreements served diplomacy rather than corporate profit margins. "There's something I should tell you," Princess Vera said, her mental voice carrying harmonics of anticipation mixed with concern. "I'm listening. The quantum resonance patterns from our neural bonding have been unusual. According to the Royal Archives, bonded pairs who achieve true consciousness integration can influence quantum probability fields in ways that affect large-scale events." Tank considered this revelation. So not only did we accidentally become the most important diplomatic couple in galactic history, we might also be developing the ability to influence reality through shared willpower. The theoretical framework suggests that possibility, yes. The archives mention bonded pairs whose decisions seemed to trigger cascade effects that reshaped political landscapes across multiple star systems. "Well," Tank said with a grin, "if we're going to accidentally develop reality-altering consciousness powers, we'd better make sure we use them responsibly. The last thing the galaxy needs is two people with shared neural patterns and the ability to fix problems by thinking about them really hard." Agreed. Though I should probably warn you that traditional Valen consciousness integration involves several ceremonies we haven't completed yet, including one where we have to synchronize our quantum resonance patterns with the royal family's ancestral matrices. Ancestral matrices, quantum resonance synchronization. Tank nodded slowly. "You know, 6 months ago I would have asked whether you were making this up. Now I'm just wondering whether I need to pack special tools for interfacing with interdimensional family trees." The ancestral matrices are actually quite welcoming to properly bonded consciousness pairs, though they do have strong opinions about engineering techniques that violate quantum mechanical principles. I'll try to keep my reality-defying repair methods to a minimum during family introductions. As the Harmony's Edge jumped to hyperspace carrying them toward their next diplomatic mission, Thomas Morrison, former maintenance engineer, current consciousness-sharing consort, and the man who'd learned that sometimes the most important repairs involved fixing the trust between peoples who had been manipulated into believing they must be enemies, settled back to watch the stars blur into streams of light while contemplating the mysterious workings of fate, duty, and the kind of love that literally rewrites the quantum structure of political reality. He'd always been good at fixing broken things. He just never imagined that his most important repair job would involve mending the relationship between civilizations by sharing his consciousness with someone whose definition of simple technology included devices that operated on principles he was still learning to understand.
Dije, el stream. Y yo, la puta madre. Y yo, chala, compadre. Valió verga. Chuchuru, chun, chun, churun, chun. Albóndigas con arroz, ensalada y sopa. Venga, turrón, qué rico. Los pobres de ayer, los que no reclamaron cofres. Así pasa, bebo. Toda la fucking vibra, güey.